Alright, yeah, and welcome back to some more Magic Duels with the new Eldrich Moon update. We are going with a fitting deck for the new release. This is going to be Zombie Tribal, so it's going to be blue-black zombies. So, before we get into the deck, if you sent me a deck tech for a subscriber deck series, then be sure to either send me it again with any Eldritch Moon updates, or I might end up doing it myself just to make it a little bit more relevant, if at all it is relevant anyway. So without further ado, let's get into the deck, shall we? So essentially, this deck plays zombies. It is zombie tribal. So all the cards revolve around being zombies and getting zombies in and out of the graveyard repeatedly. So key cards are Diagraph Colossus. So when it enters the battlefield, it enters with +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in your graveyard, and when you cast a zombie, you get a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield tapped. So we want to overwhelm our opponent and then finish them by playing something like a Graph Harvest. So for a 1-mana enchantment, zombies you control have Menace. So we can essentially double up our damage in a way by halving the amount of blocks they can make. So we can actually go very wide with this and make it very difficult for our opponent to beat us. We're also going to be filling our graveyard as well, so we'll have plenty of fodder for this 3 and a black. Exile a creature card from your graveyard, put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield, untapped, might I add. So we can use it to block creatures as well if they don't actually look at our graveyard. So how do we fill our graveyard? We fill it with Screeching Scabs, a 2-mana zombie. When Screeching Scarb enters the battlefield, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. It's also a 2/1. So we'll throw this into death all the time. We'll just throw it into our blockers so that we can fill our graveyard up with it. And then we can pull them back with our recursion. But we also have a good synergy card for Zombie Tribal, Compelling Deterrence. 1 and a blue, instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So that could be a tutelage, it could be a creature, anything that's not land, essentially. And if we control a zombie, they discard a card. So we're going to get a lot of value out of this. It's going to be attacking our opponent's hand, and it's going to be slowing down our opponent and reducing the amount of blockers they have for when we've menaced a few of our zombies in and gone wide that way. Okay, so we've got our zombies. We're planning on getting them in the graveyard. What do we do then? We recur them back to our hand mostly. So Macabre Waltz, 1 and a black, sorcery, return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, then discard a card. So we can pull back as many zombies as we want, and then we can drop a land or whatever spare, maybe even another creature. If we've got a Diagraph Colossus, then we might want to get value by dropping another creature back into the graveyard that way. It's only a 2 of because we've got our new card from Eldritch Moon, Cemetery Recruitment. 1 and a black, sorcery speed, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. If it is a zombie, then you get to draw a card. So it's a cantrip because this will always grab a zombie. I don't think we've got a Liliana. I think that is the only non-zombie creature. Oh, and Geralt, Geezer and Geralt as well. So there's 2 creatures in our deck that are not zombies. So this will be a cantrip most of the time. So it's going to draw us a card, and it's going to get a creature back of our choice back from the graveyard, which is a lot of value for us. So that could be a lot of our value creatures, like Fleshbag Marauder, for example. On to Liliana, Heretical Healer. We are fully aware of this card if you've been watching Magic Duels for a very long time. So 1 and 2 black, legendary creature, Human Cleric, lifelink, 2/3. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, exile her and then return her to the battlefield as a Planeswalker, and you get a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield. Yay! So we have plenty of ways of killing our own creatures, and obviously we'll be throwing our creatures into suicidal blocks and stuff like that for a little bit of value as well. So when creatures die, she turns into Liliana Defiant Necromancer. So +2, each player discards a card. Not too bad for us because we get to drop our creatures in that we'll get to return later. And it's going to attack our opponent's hand as well, which actually enables our Compelling Deterrence to become a removal spell. Didn't mention this. If our opponent is empty-handed and we Compelling Deterrence, whatever we bounce, they have to discard. So it's actually a 2-mana instant removal spell then, which is awesome. But anyway, back to the Planeswalker. We can also do -X to return target non-legendary creature card with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is reanimate. So there's quite a lot this can hit, and because we'll be plussing 2 as well, we can get a loyalty quite high to do the -X. Her ultimate is very useful for us. You get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So whenever our opponent's creatures dies, we get it back. Whenever our creatures die, we get them back. So we can actually sack Fleshbag Marauders every turn, and then on our end step we get them back and we sack them again, and then on their end step they come back, and then it's just an infinite cycle of removal that way. And we also have plenty of creatures to recur back. We have Diagraph Colossus, so 2 and a black, zombie giant. We've already talked about this guy. He gets counters for every zombie in your graveyard, and when you cast a zombie, you get a 2/2. Lots of value from this guy. If you can get him out, you can go very wide, which is really good for our Graph Harvest as well. So we want to see these guys very often. We have Fleshbag Marauders, 2 and a black, zombie warrior 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. So we get to sacrifice a flesh bag, and we have plenty of ways to get it back, like Cemetery Recruitment, Macabre Waltz, that kind of deal. So we're going to be sacking their creatures very in the early game as well, if they've only got 1 creature on the board as well, so we can get a lot of value from that. We have a new card from Eldrich Moon, 2 and a black, Liliana's Elite. So a 1/1, and it gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, which you can imagine this guy can get quite big. Most of the time he averages, in this deck anyway, about a 4 to 6/6, essentially. Depending on the time you got him out anyway. If you get him out turn 3, he could still be a 1/1. But if we've been doing a lot of discarding and a lot of sacrificing, he can get him quite big. So we have Murder, the best hard cast removal in black, officially I believe. So 1 and 2 black, instant speed, destroy target creature. It's not work if you enjoy it. Yes. That's pretty much YouTube careers in a nutshell. But yes, hard cast removal speaks for itself really. I figured we'd add it in since it is Eldritch Moon and it is a awesome removal spell. Liliana, the Last Hope. 1 and 2 black, a 3 loyalty planeswalker from the Eldritch Moon set. And she fits zombies perfectly well, because she's got them in the background. That's all. Moving on. No, actually joking. Her +1 loyalty. Up to 1 target creature gets -2, -1 until end of the turn. So we can take out some 1 toughness creatures, that might be tokens or other creatures like that. So a +1 ability can be a removal spell. It can also be classed as a better version of Jace's +1, where they get -2, -0. So it's actually a lot better than that. And Jace is quite good for delaying creatures and slowing them down. So if it's good with Jace, it's good with Liliana. -2 ability. Put the top 2 cards of your library into the graveyard, then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So a -2 ability, we can use her to get back Fleshbag Marauders and stuff like that. Also self-mills us, which is part of the plan that we're trying to do to get a little bit of value out of some of our cards. So we can self-mill some creatures into the graveyard, for example, and keep pulling them back. And then a -7 ability, which hopefully we get to show off. I did manage to get it done once in playtesting, and it is brutal. So you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is 2 plus the number of zombies you control. So at a bare minimum, this gets you 2 zombies on the end of your end step. And, you know, on an average run, if you're ultimate and you're Liliana, you've usually got about 2 to 3 zombies. So you actually, on your end step, get 5 zombies. And then after that, you're going to get 10 zombies, then 20 zombies. And it spirals out of control that way. So hopefully we get to see that in action. And you can imagine if they're menaced as well with the Graph Harvest, it's just going to... it's ending game that way. Drunau Corpse Trawler, however you pronounce that. 3 and a blue, zombie 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. And then the ability that we mainly want it for, 2 and a black, target zombie gains death touch until the end of the turn. Turns all of our creatures into an unbeatable wall, essentially. Trump would be proud. So we can turn any of our tokens into death touching tokens, which can destroy any creature as long as it's not first striking or indestructible. As long as those two things aren't occurring, then this is just removal for any creature that comes our way. It's also, we can do it in response to them blocking, which with Menace as well, we can potentially get 2 kills off of it. So we can get a lot of value from this guy. Laboratory Brute, we've got 3 and a blue, 3 of this guy. When he enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. Yet again, some more self-milling to get some more creatures into our graveyard. This guy looks really cool. He's got the brain in the jar over here. So we self-mill ourselves, get a lot of creatures into the graveyard, a lot more value off of some of our creatures, like the Liliana's Elite, like the Digraph Colossus, and even the Cemetery Recruitment. And we can even get this guy back and get some more self-milling going with maybe the Gisa and Geralf, or Gisa and Geralf. I'm not really sure how you pronounce her name, to be honest. 2, a blue and a black, legendary creature, human wizard, mythic. 4/4, so when these guys enter the battlefield, you get to put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard, which is likely, hopefully, going to be some creatures. And then during each of your turns, we may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard. So you can cast a single zombie from your graveyard each turn, which is awesome. We could get back our Digraph Colossus, which will then in future reanimates, get us back a 2/2 zombie at the same time. We'll be doing Laboratory Brute, so we could get Laboratory Brute back with Gisa, which will get 4 more cards in a graveyard, which gives us more options. The cycle continues. The only 2 creatures we can't, well, 2 things that we want to get back that we can't is Liliana, because she's a human cleric, and our other Liliana, because she's not a creature. She's unfortunate, so once Liliana's gone, she's gone for good, unfortunately. We can, however, get back our Liliana with Cemetery Recruitment and Macabre Waltz, though. So all is not lost in that regard. And then we have 2 Languish. Speaks for itself. All creatures get -4/-4 until the end of the turn. This is for when it's not going well for us, and it's our board wiping black. So this is very self-destructive to us, but there are ways that we can benefit from this anyway. So we can languish away our board, Gisa and Geralf, and then start pulling back some of the creatures we may have lost in our board wipe. So that's the deck anyway, guys. Onto the lands. So we've got 8 islands and 9 swamps. As you can see, we do have a skew more in the swamp region. So we do have a lot of early game cards though, so we do want that balance, but not so much as to hit blue more than black. So we have skewed it slightly in that direction. And then we have lots of dual lands. We have Sunken Hollow, comes in tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands, very likely to happen. We have Drownyard Catacombs, comes in tapped unless you have an island or a swamp. Very unlikely this card will come in tapped unless it's the only land in your hand when you start the game, which I would never take a 1 land hand, so it's not going to happen. This is always an untapped dual land for us. And then we have our 2 Drownyard Temples. So we do a lot of self-milling, which means we can actually throw a lot of useful lands into the graveyard. So we've put these 2 in here. They're a bit counterproductive since they're colourless, but if they do get thrown in our graveyard, they're very useful because it's actually a little bit of ramp for us. So for 3 mana, we can return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, so we can get a lot of value out of that. Right, guys, if you enjoyed the look of the deck, then be sure to check out the match that should be following shortly after this. If you want your deck to be shown next week, by the way, send me your decks either in the comment section below, on Twitter, or by email, whichever's fine with you. If you've enjoyed the content, then be sure to leave a like. If you've loved the content, then be sure to subscribe. But if you're not quite sure, stay for the end card, see the rest of the content we've got to offer. And as always, see you next time. Bye-bye.